got to remind myself to stare at the camera, not everywhere else.
Well, hello. We're back at it again. John Turner, Dan Stickrat. It is our pre-show before the high school ranking show kicks off here in just about 35 minutes. And we have a special guest here tonight in studio with us. But before we get into our special guest, please remember, subscribe, like us on Facebook, on all the social media platforms, as we are excited to continue to bring you this content. Some very exciting news that we'll bring to you here later this week is we officially signed our first licensing deal here, Dan, over the weekend, and that will, it is an amazing opportunity for us to showcase what we're doing here at MSN and with all the athletes across the great state of Michigan. And it is only going to continue to add value to what we do. But hey, this whole pre-show is about talking about high school rankings, what they're all about, the makeup of them, giving you some more input and insight into the rankings as we see them change from week to week to week. And we are excited to have special guests here tonight in studio with us, the first time ever making his debut, and that is Mr. Kevin Tuitt. And Kevin, man, welcome here into our MSN studios, Premier Sports Center studios here in Shelby Township. Welcome to the network.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're excited to have you along. So, Kevin, you've been a coach at U of D for 25 years. The chair of the Division I for over 20 years. So talk about, first off, a little bit about yourself here, about what the chair's responsibilities are for Division I.
Mainly try to get information around the state from games that you're watching yourself or contacting other coaches that you trust that have seen matches or played against other opponents. And then hopefully for all the people out there who, always have an opinion, please submit information. The more feedback, the better. There's times like, hey, we just beat that team. Yeah, but you don't know that they were missing 6 of their starters. That's the biggest challenge that you have sitting in this chair for all the division chairs, whether it be 2, 3, or 4, and whether it be the boys or the girls side, is a lot of times not everyone's dealing with the same information you are, and sometimes you've been withheld information because someone prefer to complain as opposed to provide data. So we look forward to as much information as possible.
No, it's a great point, and I think that we sit in these chairs every week, and to be fair, Division I has been, I think, the one, Dan, that we talk about every week that has the most parity. You see a lot of consistency in 4, 3, and 2, and that can be for many different reasons. We talk about how difficult the OAA red is, the KLA, how difficult the MAC red is. Right, there are a lot of teams that are playing very competitive soccer week in and week out, and it's really difficult to get I would say to do like a check to see who's real and who's not, right? I mean, we've seen, if we just talk about the OAA red for a second and just what happened this past week alone, right? We saw Troy Athens, who, we were at that game. I mean, just beat up on Oxford 4-0 on Thursday of last week. Tuesday of last week. It was, to be fair, it was like Athens was the only one on that field that night. But Oxford, we've seen them play. They're not a bad team. They just got rolled over on Tuesday, but they still won the red.
Yeah.
They lost 4-0, but they still won the red because Berkeley, they lost to Rochester Adams in their first loss. Well, that was their second loss, I think, in the, that was the first loss in the red. But, it just goes to show you that you could back into a OAA red title by losing 4-0 on a Tuesday night. But again, they beat Clarkston earlier this season, 2-0, right? So it just goes to show you how crazy this whole thing can be. And I think sitting in your chair, obviously you're a high school coach, so that in itself can be just a lot of work. How are you able to have these conversations? Is there a process where, hey, emails are coming through and flooding your emails every single week? Are you having a boatload of phone conversations? Like how are people getting in contact with you to tell you that, hey, this team is for real, this team is not?
Well, it's a combination of all of it now. The great part is we have more media, which gives more people opportunity to get feedback in. I was talking to Dan earlier about the fact that 10, 15 years ago, it was predominantly phone and driving to go catch games and see, okay, this is my third game on a Friday night, just so you could go witness what was happening in the game, and pre all-state selection, driving around the state to catch a district game or a regional game because you wanted to physically see that player play. And now one of the things that the state has done with the MPR is now all the teams have to submit their scores. And I'm not going to mention the different brackets and leagues that were absent at putting any public standings out there, which made it a nightmare trying to do rankings and trying to do the state show. Now I can go on to the state website and check the MPR, and I can click on that team's name, and I can pull up their regular league and see how they've done. That has its advantages, but that's only one side of it. Everybody can do that, which is good. The challenge now is contacting and building a network of other coaches that you trust. One, their viewpoint, their consistency and honesty about their own team and their opponents. Are they taking personal opinions out of it and giving me a blow by blow? This, here you go, this player is here. Adam Lycan out of Oxford is a great resource because he's been around long enough that he's seen players and he can compare them back and forth. Todd Hughes, another one that I reach out to regularly. I go to war with Gene Police at CC, and we have fun, and that's a good battle back and forth, but I can make a phone call to these guys. You've got the west side when we had Conlin and Gugamis at Okemos. These guys had been around long enough, knew what a college player looked like, knew what a decent high school player looked like, and could be honest with their opinion. The added part of that, too, is by making the personal connections with a lot of these coaches through the state, I could actually get a behind the scenes, hey, yeah, we lost, but it was my senior night, and I played all my seniors. We lost, but I was missing 4 of my starters because they were taking the SAT or whatever the case may be, an injury, a red card, that not everybody else has that information, and they didn't really want it out there. So those are the kind of things that can affect the standings. But technology now has been great with the ability to access at least the data. So.
No, it's great. And if you're, we just went live on Instagram, so if you're watching on Instagram, you can also watch on YouTube. It's free, and we always talk about that. But the thing that I want to say, and Ed Sack just actually put a comment in here. Kevin is a class act, 25 plus years of high school coaching service. Great job volunteering to serve as the state rep, just adds to his dedication. And Kevin, I've known you. I didn't realize how much I knew you, but back 1999, that was my final season as a senior in high school. But from a refereeing standpoint, had a lot of a good relationship with you, and also from a coaching standpoint, when I was at Groves, had a chance to play against you guys a couple of times. I mean, the reality is and when we do this show, Dan, we talk about this a lot, is, we're the mouthpiece, right? We're the ones who are sitting up here, talking about the rankings. There are people at home, the viewer at home, and there are parents out there, and players alike, who just don't understand how they're 15-0. And they're not in the rankings, right? And we know that a 15-0 team doesn't mean a whole lot, depending upon who you're playing against, right? It's about who you're playing against, what leagues that you're in. There are a lot of teams out there that have very good seasons, and you have to tip your hat to them and say, hey, what a great season that's been for you. But you're beating teams 8-0. You've scored 130 goals in one season. I mean, you look at a Troy Athens who, for the better part of this season, has not been in the rankings. Well, they were not in the rankings. I mean, they were in there week 1 in the pre-rankings, and then they bounced out, and they were not back in until like 2 weeks ago, right? When they got their way back in. Maybe it was last week they got back in. But a perfect example of Troy Athens, and something that we talk about with Todd Hugh and with a lot of these teams, is that they don't always have the better talent, but they have these teams that just know how to play soccer. They have the depth, right? The depth where, you take a player off the field, someone steps in, and they're scoring goals, right? And that's the difference maker in going from being a 15-0 team who has beaten teams 8-0 and winning a state championship, right? Because look what happened with Oxford. Oxford does not have maybe the depth that they are going to need to make a long playoff run. They've got a lot of really good players, and Annette Bikens did a great job at Oxford.
Yeah.
But does Oxford have enough depth to get through a long playoff run here, going through the likes of a Davison, the likes of, as we talked about, Lapeer, and also going through Clarkston
or Grand Blanc?
Or Grand Blanc, right? I mean, do they have the depth? Because what we have seen from championship caliber teams year in and year out is they have depth. They have players. They have that 15, 16, 17 players deep that can come off the bench and they don't miss a beat. And Athens has that. Does a Berkeley have that? Does a Clarkston have that, right? Who is the team this year that's going to have the depth? And I truly believe the team that has the most depth, not the most talent, the team that can find a way to just have pieces coming in and out that just get crucial minutes, will end up sending them off the promised land and winning a state championship.
I think that's why we saw Rochester Adams win it last year, and Catholic Central got to the Final Four. Rockford was your state runner-up. Not only did they have college players in their starting lineup, they had very good players. But again, they could go 5, 6, 7, 8 off that bench and not really have a drop-off. And I think especially in Division I and Division II, when there's so many teams that are so close in talent, you need that, because we were talking off camera before the show about some of the great teams back in the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s. However, in today's arena, we have the MLS Next Academy and the Girls Academy and some ECNL teams that are pulling some of that talent. So there's no longer a high school team that's going to walk out with 9 Division I and 2 Division II kids in their starting lineup. Those days are gone. It will likely never happen again. So I think, Kevin, in your situation, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that makes it a little bit more difficult to rank because there are so many teams in boys and girls soccer, especially, again, in D1 and D2, that are so close.
Yeah, that's true, Dan. Especially when you remove that top 50 in an age bracket on the guys and the girls side, and people don't always understand. When you have a player that's that level, that player's consistency is much higher. Where what you have now is you have a lot of good players, a lot of great players, a lot of kids who are very capable of playing college. Some of them are coming back from Academy and MLS Next and ECNL because they miss having the fun with their friends. And that can make a huge swing on a team that you didn't have on your radar, but all of a sudden 3 at the next level come back into the game, and it totally changes the team. That consistency, though, of some of those teams from the 90s and the early 2000s and even the late 80s where, like you said, we were talking with Paul Bartashuk, or Bakari Bartashuk, sorry, over at Country Day. He had an entire roster that was going to play college ball, and he could go to his bench and pick a kid who was going to be a D2 starter as a freshman. That was a seriously dominant level of play. Now you've got hard workers, and if you're sprinkled in with some of those special players and you got guys that believe in each other, you can have all kinds of fun and magic happen out on the field. But the consistency is a tough challenge statewide to see.
Yeah, and I obviously I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I there's a fan at home right now, and we kind of touched on this a bit ago. There's a fan at home right now who has a player who scored 30 goals this season, and their team's not ranked, right? Or maybe they've been ranked, and they're not in the rankings anymore. They're still undefeated, or not undefeated, but maybe they have again a 14-2-1 record. What is the message to that team, that parent, that coach right now, whose team is maybe in the top 25, maybe they have that record, but aren't in the top 15?
Well, I would say that's one of my biggest challenges. You could make it almost a top 50. You have so many teams that are popping in and out, and there's challenges. I'll give you my standard answer to that question each season when I get a player or a parent or a coach that says, hey, I've got this kid who's got 25 goals. Okay, excellent. Who have you played? And then they'll give me a list. And I think you alluded to it earlier. Sometimes you look at that list and he's got 7 goals against this team, 8 goals against that team, 5 goals against this team, 4 goals against that team, none of which are ranked and none of which are in the powerhouse. And then you take a kid who's coming out of the OAA Red or the Catholic League, and that kid is playing against a brutal defense on a consistent basis, and he's got 10 goals. That kid may be a far better player than the kid who's got 30. That being said, hats off to the kid who's got 30 goals. Scoring 30 goals in whatever league you're in is awesome. It doesn't matter as a high school player who you're scoring against. The fact is that you're scoring. That kid's learning how to score and he's having fun and his team should enjoy it. By no means because I screwed up on a ranking or I missed a thing or I just disagree with what level they're playing at. That kid should not hold any negative toward his 30 goals. Still applaud him. If your teammate's got 30 goals, pat him on the back. That's phenomenal. Every goalie wishes they had multiple players that had 30 goals. It gives them some breathing room.
That's a great response. I mean, I don't think, Kevin, for 1 second that you take this process lightly. I don't think any of the chairs take it lightly. I think that the reality is that, you know, hey, when you're charged with trying to figure out the best of the best, you know, it's very objective.
Yeah.
I mean, we can laugh about that and talk, but it really is. I mean, Dan and I, we talk, I don't know, half a dozen times a day now, I feel like, you know, every day of the year. And we have this conversation about these teams, you know, and you know, here's the thing. I think that when, from my perspective, as a fan of this game, Kevin, my perspective, but I've been pretty consistent about this from week to week to week, is that it is the rankings that we see coming out the first week of the season to the last week of the season, are they with the mindset that those teams are the, in fact, best teams in the state that have the quote-unquote best chance to win a championship? Or is it the here and now? It's not about championships. It's, hey, right now this team is playing the best breed of soccer in the state of Michigan.
I'd say it's a combination. In the beginning, we try to take a look at, all right, how was your last year's performance? Did you lose any players? Did you gain any players? Take a look, were they playing in a summer league? Any sniffs? Guys making phone calls, hey, they're picking up 2 more guys that weren't here. Hey, they've got a new freshman coming in, or they've got a transfer student who's now eligible, whatever the case may be. That one's a whole lot of phone calls and trying to get feedback from as many coaches as I can for the beginning. Through the season, I try to respect the in the moment. If someone's on an uptick, if someone's crashing for a while, like, hey, they're going to need to take a break. I know they're a solid team, but he just lost like 4 guys, and they don't have the depth. Those 4 guys were huge. Like you mentioned with Athens, they have some depth, pretty much like a machine. Todd does a great job. I think he has a pool of players that he can probably go into his 16th player and keep a run going without dipping too much. That makes it tough. He can rotate somebody up top, he can rotate somebody in the mid, he can rotate in the backfield and still hold his own. That's a dangerous grinding machine to go against in the playoffs. But the final ranking, the only one that matters, and the reason why we play the tournament, is at the end. Who's standing with the trophy? So many times there's been teams like, yep, saw that one coming, and then there's times where, oh, the team you thought was going to be the best, probably was the best, is out in the first round. There's challenges there. So do you want to vote on, are they the best team, or are they going to win the championship? Because it's not always the same. You can take a look at teams that have had a phenomenal record, played some great soccer, and tripped or fell in the first, second, or third round and you're not even watching them play in the regionals. And then some people just have that Hail Mary run, and it's great for them, phenomenal. They come out of the rankings, maybe out of the top 10, and all of a sudden they're knocking off a bunch of top 10 teams, and they make it all the way through. So, depends. Do you want the rankings or do you want the trophy? I mean, so it seems like everyone wants both, but I'll tell you, as a coach who's been on both sides of winning and losing, I'll take the trophy at the end.
No, I couldn't agree with you more on that. And when we talk about that, Dan, and talk about, because we've mentioned this many times, at the end of the year, I'm a firm believer in sometimes when the adversity of being in a ranking and the adversity of not being in the rankings. And then ultimately the goal of hoisting a championship, right? There's only 4 teams at the end of the season that are going to have a chance to say they're the best. And that's obviously taking place on November the 4th. And, at one place for the first time, I can't think of ever.
I think it's phenomenal. I think that was one.
Haven't they talked about doing this for years?
Well,
and
yeah.
never been able to work it out.
It's finally happening, and obviously Grand Ledge, is the place where it's going to be at. We're going to be there again with our pre-show that we'll do here on location at Grand Ledge for that for those 4 state finals. It's phenomenal, and we couldn't be more excited about it. Question coming in here: how do you all feel about Groves High School? Well, being that Groves High School was my former team that I coached for 5 years, from 2015 to 2019, I feel very good about Groves High School. A number of years ago, when you guys won a district championship and went on to regional semis, actually, I think you beat Livonia Stevenson, didn't they, in that district final? You had a good crop of young talent come through that started off when I was there towards the latter end of my career there at Groves. And you graduated some really good players. And I think right now you're in that kind of, not rebuilding. We use the word rebuilding maybe sometimes, but maybe just retooling, But yeah, you're a young team. I think that you have some really good pieces. You just need another year or 2 of experience, and I think that you'll be right back where you were here a couple of years ago. And unfortunately, that's kind of some schools have to go through that. You haven't really seen a lot of that at Berkeley. Berkeley's been pretty good and consistent for about 12 years now. They've always been in that conversation, in the rankings. They've been up there. A lot of the teams in the OAA Red, it's just a hotbed of soccer. And, Groves High School is kind of known more for its football. And it's been that way for many years, had a lot of success. So I think Seaholm has been unfortunately a lot of the more talented players have found their way to Seaholm. But we think very highly of you, Groves. So don't think for one second that we don't. I think they actually made the rankings here a couple of years ago as well when they were making that run into the district. So, but
2 years ago, I think out of the OAA, I think Birmingham, Groves, Rochester, and Royal Oak Kimball all cracked the top 15 at one point, if I remember correctly.
You just say Kimball?
Yeah.
Or Royal Oak High.
Holy moly!
That's a good class.
Yeah, Kimball's been gone a few years.
He just said Kimball.
Royal Oak High, yeah.
Next Dondero.
Well, hey, Kevin's with us here. He'll be here with us all night long. If you're watching and want to ask the Division I chair a question, here is your opportunity to do just that. So ask away. We are here. We have our pre-show here for the next 10 minutes or so. So ask your questions, get them in. Obviously, we know Ed Sack got his comment in. But ask away. This is a great opportunity for you to have a conversation with us about the rankings, about the high school season. We are excited. We're going to do our first ever playoff preview show. This plan was to do it tomorrow night, but we might actually push that because I want Dan to be there for that. So we might push that to Tuesday night. So hopefully Dan might be back in town. If not, we'll have to send him with a camera encoder and do it remotely someplace in the woods of wherever he might be. But we're going to talk about every single district matchup here across the state of Michigan on that preview show. We're going to give you our predictions about who we think is going to win that district as well.
Good luck with that.
Some of these believe
So we're going to give you our prediction who we think is going to win the district final in each of those districts, all 16 from each division across the state of Michigan. And then we will do it for regionals, the semifinals, and the finals. And Dan and I are going to have a little fun bet. Whoever loses has to shave their head. I don't think I would look good shaved, but either way.
I think you guys are getting jealous.
But get your questions in while you can as we continue this conversation with Kevin Tuitt, the head coach of the University of Detroit Jesuit, and been there for 25 years. He's been the chair of Division I for over 20. So he has a wealth of knowledge and experience to talk about this division. And tonight, before we even get into the ranking show, this Division I, Kevin, is very fun. Is fun the word? Fun. Fun. This one's a fun one because in the email, I don't typically get comments from the chairs when they send me their rankings. This week, Kevin did send me a little jingle in the email. It was the first time I've gotten that from him when we do this, but I wanted to see if it's here. It is. He absolutely nuts is what he put in the email to me. This goes to show you. But talking about nuts, Dan, you and I had a chance to cover a game on Wednesday night, the Catholic League Finals. If you have not watched that Catholic League Final yet,
Please do so.
You need to do it. A video will be coming out tomorrow, and it's not meant to pick at the referees at all. It's just meant to have some fun because during the course of that game, a week, I went and watched the video. I counted every conference between the referees. There were 11 conferences between the referees during that game. So a video coming out tomorrow to kind of highlight those conferences in a fun way. Dan, 4 red cards issued in that game. There were 6 goals scored in regulation, and it went into the 6th round of kicks in a penalty shootout in which the team that was down 3 players and a coach came back and won that game. So a
non-Michigan school, Toledo St. John Jesuit, first year in the Catholic High School League. They had 3 red cards plus their coach was ejected, and they held on, withstood a lot of firepower by Orchard Lake St. Mary's, got it to a shootout. Their goalie's very good. I'd have to imagine he'll be an all-state level goalie in Ohio's Coach Association choices, but he held them in. They held them in, and they got to a shootout, and they missed their first attempt and hit 5 straight. And they're your new Catholic League High School. Bishop champs. I mean, and Kevin, you had a chance to see. What was it like having 3 new teams in the Central Division, and then I think Jackson Luma Christi was in one of the lower divisions, correct?
Well, honestly, it was nice for a change. We've done probably 5 different variety packs of how we were going to run the Central Division. I've had years where I had to play Rice or De La Salle, seeing Jay Lewis or Terry 4 times in the same season was not enjoyable. I like the guys, but that was brutal. There was a time we ended up winning the Catholic League championship, and then sitting and watching De La Salle and Rice share the state finals. That was the last year that D1 did the co-winners. And then the following year, we took a beating in the final and ended up winning the championship. So it was an interesting match. We did it where we mixed with 1 up and 1 down. Then we moved to the format that we had, and now bringing in 3 new teams out of Ohio. It's kind of good because you play each opponent once. Every game matters. There's no chance for a replay. That's it. So you got to get up for every single game, and every point counts. And the Catholic League is just like every other competitive league. 1 goal can make a 2-place shift. You end up with a tie versus a win, or a tie versus a loss, and it can totally wreck or make your entire season. I mean, as OAA Red found out, wins and losses and ties make a big difference, and here's Viking coming in with I think it's Oxford's first OAA championship. So
First red, they won a couple whites.
Right. But first for the red against the big dogs. And so it's been fun. We'll see. I mean, it's Ohio and Michigan, so that's an interesting combination.
Well, it is, and Claudio Cabrera, the head coach of St. John's Jesuit, he was, hey, we're from Ohio, we're here to stay. One of his statements during that game. But if you haven't watched it, it's available on demand right now on our YouTube channel. By all means, please take a look at that game. The highlights, if you want to just watch the highlights, there's plenty to watch there. It was over a 3-hour and 15-minute match. So the longest game, I think, in the history of soccer taking place last week. Question coming in from G-Bands. Is your last name Turner? Yes, it is. So that I was the former coach of the Birmingham Groves Falcons. And Ed Sack coming in with a question. If we are going to use MPR to seed the 1 and 2 seeds, I don't think I even have to say the rest of this statement or this comment. We know where this is going, and I think that knowing what I know about the MHSA, and I'll take this one for you, Kevin, because I feel like you don't, because Kevin unfortunately does not have any say in this, or neither do we when it comes to this. But the MHSA is an organization that likes to stick to what they have always done. It's probably the best way to explain it. I mean, and because they look at this,
slow to change.
Well, they look at this from the standpoint of this is an extension of the classroom, right? That's their viewpoint on this, and I think a lot of times they follow that line, they tote that line as much as they possibly can. And I think if you ask athletic directors as well, and athletic directors, when you start talking, and I used to talk with Bob Dowd about this all the time with Troy Athens. His viewpoint on a lot of these things to be fair, was completely contradictory to that of what the coaches wanted in certain things like this. But we're totally supportive of soccer, right? We're very much supportive of soccer. But they when it came to with referees, hey, if a player said anything on the field, they wanted a red card. I mean, you ask every athletic director out there, they want their players getting tossed for things like this because they know that should not be happening on the field. And so I think with that being said, as much as I think seeding would be great because what happened in the Berkeley district is just completely unfair.
It's puzzling.
I mean, the word unfair is the wrong word to use, but it's like you're sitting here, the number 1 seed has the toughest route in that district to get to a final. I mean, even if they get to that final, it's like by the time they get there, what's left of them? And that's what you were talking about too, Kevin, is you have these districts where, it's such a brutal district that by the time you get to regionals, you're like a skeleton of the team that you were going into it, and throw the depth out the window. It doesn't really matter at that point. You're hobbling in with crutches. I mean, because these are such brutal games. It's very, very difficult. It is 7:57. We have exactly 2 minutes before we go live with the high school ranking show. Dan Stickrat, John Turner. We're joined by Kevin Tewitt, the Division I chair for the Michigan High School Soccer Coaches Association. Aaron Marenko says, "Cool." Yeah, I mean, it's cool. It's been a cooler day today for sure.
To expand upon the seeding, like the MHSA finally got involved with seeding first and second in their districts based on the point system. And to give you a background information, regardless if it was a boys or girls soccer, softball, baseball, volleyball, boys and girls basketball, any sport where there's a 1-game elimination, for decades, they drew up the border lines, 6, 7, 8 schools, whatever there is in a district, and the ADs or the coaches got together with a baseball hat. They pulled the slips out of a hat. And yeah, unfortunately, in a lot of sports, you'd have power districts, and then you'd have 4 of the top 8 schools in a particular sport playing on the first night. Not just with soccer, but you go back to the powerhouse days where you'd have Flint Central, Flint Northern, Saginaw, and Saginaw Arthur Hill playing on the first night of the boys basketball. Or you'd have Detroit Cooley and Detroit Southwestern playing on the first night in boys basketball. It was always this way. At least they're moving in the right direction. I think they do a very good job with seeding an entire region with boys lacrosse and girls lacrosse. Hopefully down the line, soccer and baseball and softball and some of the other sports will do the same way. But yeah, some of these, even the point system, it still has a lot of flaws. I've seen some of these district pairings, and I sit there and scratch my head saying, how did that happen?
Yeah, you never know if it's going to be perfect, right? But it only took us 20 years to get to the point that we actually are using seating of any form.
For sure.
So that's nice. But you still, like you said, Berkeley's stuck in well, we were there last 2 years, just in a brutal cauldron. I mean, what a crucible for Steve to have his boys in. But if he comes out of that, there's no one who can say anything about any of the teams coming out of that pool.
Nope.
Nothing negative. And if they can do the seeding, they got to 1, maybe got to 2. But then when we start getting with seeding of the entire district or seeding district play, so you're seeding who you're going to play when you advance to regionals, that's where the pushback starts to come from the athletic directors, because now you're talking about busing, now you're talking about distance. And my argument as a coach, and I'm saying this selfishly as a coach, I'm pretty sure I could convince my parents if I could play in a easier district, most of my parents would be glad to not have to play in the district that Berkeley and Athens and Troy are playing in.
Makes sense.
You know what, I understand, like in northern Michigan, they don't really have a choice.
Right.
In different sports, because there's already a distance between them. There's only so many schools in every division up there. But in Detroit area, you look at Macomb County and Oakland County and even, Wayne and Livingston, you could mix up some of these districts and bounce them off a little bit, and teams won't have to go more than 30 miles away.
Correct. And I think it's doable. I'm not saying it doesn't have flaws or potential flaws. There will be challenges. But say every 3 years, reshuffle something, just so the same teams aren't good. Look at Henry Clemus at Northville. How many years has he had a great team, but he's had to go through Northville, Stevenson when they're on their A game, and just go to war, and then he's coming out and he's playing Canton, or he's playing Salem, or Saline, or Pioneer, or Huron, when they're on fire. Clemus has had some great teams, never got out. How would you like to be Rockford, who's got to go against East Kentwood for how many years?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people didn't know how good Rockford was for a decade because he had to go through East Kentwood, and they'd get knocked out in the first or second round, and we're like, well, how can you show love to this team? I'm like, because I saw that team beat 9 out of these 10 teams in front of you, except they had to play this team in their first or second
Yeah,
round.
you look at like Forest Hill Central was Division I for a while there. Caledonia has had some good teams, Grand Haven, Muskegon Mona Shores. I mean, it's just the same way out there in Ottawa Kent Conference as it is over here on the east side. There's so many good teams every year, and they're all shoved in the same 2 or 3 districts. And conferences, it's so hard to win a championship at any level.
I couldn't agree with you more, but guys, we have to hop into our high school ranking show. So when we come back here from our intro, we will bring you the Week 8 high school rankings live on the Michigan Soccer Network.
Back to Beatrial. He'll take a shot and he'll bear it! And then he'll fire it from Billows and it'll go in! Now Worrell has a good cutback from him. He'll fire one and that's gonna go in! Oh, and both goals so far. He'll fire one and that's a wonderful save, Trinity. That's missed. Oh, it's Stone! And he'll fire one now from distance and that is in! What a strike by Ben Maher!
Well, hello. Welcome into Week 8 of the Michigan High School Soccer Coaches Association Ranking Show. My name's John Turner alongside Dan Stickrett. We're live here in our Premier Sports Center studios in Shelby Township, Michigan. And we are excited to bring you the top 15 teams from around the state in each division. As this is the second to last week of rankings, we will have one more ranking show here next Sunday to wrap up the 2023 ranking season. And Dan, we talk about nutty. Nutty was the word given to me earlier today in regards to rankings. A lot of things going on, movements happening. Do we have any new number ones this week? We'll let you know. But some changes happening at all 4 divisions here today, this week. And Dan, as always, we're excited to be able to bring this coverage to you here on this Sunday evening.
And is that a precursor to the upcoming state tournaments just around the corner? It's that time of year where conferences are wrapping up. A lot of conference tournaments will be decided tomorrow night. More than a dozen leagues will have their conference tournaments wrap up tomorrow, which will decide the final pecking order of those conferences as well. And then the pre-districts start the later stages of next week. The brackets are all up. The seating's already done. It's all available for any MHSSCA school. You can tell where and when their possible pathway may go, but it's that time of year. It is October, and we're ready for another ranking show with a very special guest here today.
Well, speaking of guests, let's bring our guest in, Mr. Kevin Tuitt. He joined us here through our pre-show, as we'll bring him in back in now, and there he is, Mr. Kevin Tuitt. Welcome back here, Indoor Premier Sports Center Studios.
Glad to be here.
Well, we're excited that you are here, as Kevin, we will have you along here for the entire show. If you have questions for Kevin, he is the Division I chair, been doing this for 20 years, so find me someone who's got more experience, and maybe we give you a free t-shirt or something. I don't know where I was going to go with that, but either way, we're excited to have you along. Division 4 will be up on tap here in a moment. If it's your first time stopping by, hit the subscribe button, like us, share this with your friends and family. The one thing that Kevin and I had a chance to talk about here, Dan, in our kind of our pre-show conversation that we talked about, was about the fact that, hey, the fact that we're here in year 2, right? Is that, and I don't know if I put that in any I've never thought about that, Dan. I've never thought about like where we are. Where we are right now in this moment, and really, taking, I guess, notice of that. This is our second year, and we are growing as fast as ever. We are nowhere near our peak. That is evident. In the last week alone, we've had over 12,000 visitors to our website alone.
Fantastic.
You think about that. That's big time numbers. With the amount of subscribers now, we just hit over 4,000 subscribers. I often joke about this, but sometimes getting a subscriber is harder than, I think, running their credit report at a car dealership. At least asking for it, you know what I mean? So we take this very seriously, and we want you to know how much we care about your input, good or bad. We like to keep it as good as clean and good as possible, of course. But we know that, hey, from time to time, we're going to make a mishap. We're going to misspell a name. We're going to mispronounce a name. I'll be honest with you. That gives me nightmares. It used to be when I used to serve tables back in college, Dan, I would have the nightmare about the bad table. But now I have the nightmare about saying the kid's name wrong.
Every broadcast we've done, we've had parents, sometimes they're very nice about it, sometimes not so nice.
Yeah, sometimes they can run in.
I spent 6 months putting together that huge player chart, the top 50 players, 150 more to watch, others to watch by position. That's 400 or 500 names of quality kids. I tried as many schools as possible from all corners of the state, and hopefully in the girls' season we'll have more participation, and the next fall more participation with the boys as we continue to grow. I didn't mean to slight anybody. I got a lot of praise, but yeah, was there a few people that questioned it or were upset because they feel like a player on their team or a couple players on their team or their conference was left off that list? I think it boils down to when you have, say, 8 schools in a conference and all 8 coaches communicate with you, it's a lot easier to know about a player or a group of players than it is of a conference of 10 schools and only 2 coaches ever reply to you. Yeah, and that actually happened on more than one occasion.
And that's going to happen. And obviously our goal here at MSN is to make sure that we're able to provide an easy and and accessible way to be able to communicate with us. We're in the process of building that infrastructure now so that coaches and players and parents alike can share information about their son, their daughter, their players, their team, so that we have that information, because that information is the most important thing. So we can't be everywhere. As we've talked about before, there are over 500 schools in the state of Michigan when it comes to soccer, and when we look at that, we could literally list 1,000 players, the best 1,000 players in Michigan. And so the reality for us is getting access to information and being able to report on that properly and efficiently and responsibly. And that is our focus, and that will continue our focus. But hey, it is time to talk about Division IV and the top 15 teams from around the state. Kevin, you've seen this. We'll read through this. If you have any input that you want to put in, by all means, Kevin, you're here. I know that you're Division I, and yeah, you're on that hot seat, as it says there behind you. So if you want to talk about other divisions because they're not involved with you, that might even be safer for you come time for Division I. So
I'll remind you that when I'm sitting in the meeting voting against them or with them, depending.
Oh boy, well, let's get into Division IV, not 1, Division IV. Top 15 teams will come across the bottom of your screen, and that will start right now. And there they are, Division IV. Number 15, previously unranked Brighton Livingston Christian, 15-1-0. Previously unranked number 14, Detroit Cristo Rey, 10-2-1. Granville Calvin Christian down 6 from last week's number 7 spot. They're 8-6-3 at 13. Byron Center Zion Christian 14-4-1. They're down 2 from 10 to number 12. Kalamazoo Christian 14-6-0. They're down 2 spots from 9 to number 11. Manchester 14-1-1. Up 4 spots from 14 to number 10. Leland 13-4-1, up 3 from number 12 to number 9. Bloomfield Hills Roper 14-2-1. They're down 4 from number 4 last week to number 8. Harbor Springs 13-4-3, up 4 spots from number 11 to number 7. Madison Heights Bishop Foley 12-2-1. They hold at that number 6 spot for the second week in a row. And now here are your top 5 teams for Division IV. Up 3 spots from number 8 to number 5, Lansing Christian, 15-5-0. Grand Rapids North Point Christian down 1 from last week's number 3 spot to number 4. They're 12-3-3. Kalamazoo Hackett, 13-1-1, up 2 spots from number 5 to number 3. And then for the, I don't know how many consecutive weeks this is now, I feel like 7. Western Michigan Christian, 14-2-3, sitting in that number 2 spot. And Grosse Pointe Woods University Lickett, 14-0-0, holding in number 1 off their decisive win over Bishop Foley here this past week in the Cardinal Championship of the Catholic League. That game available on our YouTube channel. They won that game 4-1.
Yeah, they're a very well-balanced team, extremely fast. They work at a fast pace. Bishop Foley is no slouch. This is Bishop Foley's probably best team they had since the late 1990s. I believe Foley last won a state championship in 97. For Liggett, it was 99. But those are 2 solid programs, and Liggett was very good, especially in the second half of that match. You look at the rankings as a whole, we got 2 newcomers. I do not believe these schools have ever been ranked before. Brighton Livingston Christian and Detroit Cristo Rey. Livingston Christian's soccer program is only 3 or 4 years old. They are in what you call the Southeastern Michigan Athletic Conference. It's 7 small Christian schools. That league just formed 3 years ago. I think they have 6 sports they have within their conference. And they have a young man who plays for the Michigan Jaguars, Ethan Harrison, who is among your leading goal scorers in the entire state of Michigan, all the leagues and conferences and governing bodies aside. He is a player to watch out for in Division IV. And Detroit Cristo Rey comes out of the Catholic High School League. Their program's, I believe, maybe 10 years old, but they returned 5 or 6 all-conference players from last year. They've kind of been in the shadows of Liggett and Foley and some of the other premier teams in the lower 2 divisions of the Catholic League, but they're playing some very good soccer. So congratulations on those 2 teams, never been ranked before. Manchester keeps climbing. We talked about the Cascades Conference finally had, I believe, 5 or 6 schools with programs. It's the first time they've had a contested boys soccer as an official league sport. They were your champions. They're 14-1-1, and they're climbing and climbing fast. Harbor Springs, there's two conferences kind of in the northwestern part of the Lower Peninsula, the Northwest Conference and the Lake Michigan Conference, where the likes of Harbor Springs, Leland, Elk Rapids is a traditional power in Division III, and Harbor Springs is playing very well. They have an exceptional freshman class. They return a lot of their players, so that's a team that broke in a couple weeks ago, and they keep climbing those charts. And in the top 5, Kalamazoo Hackett is a very good junior class. They won that Valley Division of the Southwestern Michigan Athletic Conference. I believe Fenville won the other division, the Lakeshore Division. And then we've talked about it. Those top 2 teams in Division IV have great histories going back to the very early 1980s, and they rarely ever seem to not do well in the sport of board soccer. So chances are those 2 teams will have a potential of making some deep runs in the postseason.
That they will. 12 total changes here this week in Division IV. The 2 teams coming in, as you mentioned, Dan, Detroit Christopher Ray, 10-2-1, Brighton Livingston Christian, 15-1-0. The teams that came out this week, Plymouth Christian, 5-2-4, and Rochester Hills Lutheran Northwest, 9-4-1. The honorable mentions this week, Hillsdale Academy, Rochester Hills Lutheran Northwest. So those are the top 15 teams for Division IV. We'll see how they shake up here. From the ranking standpoint, we didn't really touch too much on this, but being this is the last week of the season, the only thing that really can impact rankings this week are tomorrow and Tuesday, as playoffs start Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week. So those games will not count towards your rankings at all. So any impact will take place in these conference championship games taking place tomorrow on the west side of the state and throughout the middle part of the state as well, and any non-conference games that take place that could have impact on the rankings. And Kevin, did you want to say something?
Yeah, we are going to throw in one more week just to toss in that first round.
Oh.
So it does take care of. So traditionally, this has been the last week.
Correct.
And the guys kind of talked about, what about that crazy upset, you know, that first round, since they split districts into 2 weeks now, you have like your first before you play the semi and the final. And you have some teams that are pulling in their league championships on Monday or Tuesday. So there's going to be one more ranking for next week, and we'll see where it goes.
So
It'll be interesting.
So I stand corrected. So what you're saying is that the rankings, the first round of playoffs will impact rankings next week?
Just the first round, yeah.
Just the first
because
round.
next week we'll be done, and then next week you would be starting that the semifinal and finals of all the districts.
So what about the teams who have a first round bye? There are some teams out there that do. Like, for example, Clarkson will not play in that first round at all this week. They will play next week, but you'll see a Berkeley play against Royal Oak, for example, on Wednesday.
Correct. So, I mean, that's a tough one with Royal Oak. Royal Oak's a good team. That's another one that is just they're in a crucible. I'm glad to be out of that district. But I'm saying that now, not anything negative against the district I'm in. The district I'm in, District 12, is going to have some wild cards and brutal, and I don't want to bet on any of those games. It's playoff time. You get constant surprises from teams. But just if you take any district in the state right now, there's no argument. The last two years for sure, that district has been tougher than anything. We were talking about the OAA Red earlier, and when we're dealing with the rankings, you can go all the way down to the number 6 team, Troy High. I haven't given them that much love because they're at 6, but Troy arguably could be in the top 10 without a problem. And they're 6 in the OAA division. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, they didn't rebuild very long. They started kind of slow, but they've picked up the pace.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that they did, and we are excited to talk more about this here after our first break. Division 4 is a wrap, as I'll just throw that off to the side now. Division 4 wrap, but when we come back from break, Division 3, top 15 teams from across the great state of Michigan. You are watching Week 8 of the Michigan High School Soccer Coaches Association Ranking Show. We'll be back after this.
there's good. Then there's sticky, sweet, spicy, double your napkins, don't even share with your own best friend. General So Good. Introducing General Soul Sauce for a limited time at Buffalo Wild Wings.
What rhymes with great?
Participate.
Where does greatness start? Here, in the classroom. On the diamond.
In the pool. On the field.
Where will your greatness take you?
To better grades.
To more friends.
Yeah! Be great.
Participate! Thank you for stopping by the Michigan Soccer Network. To not miss out on any of the action, all you have to do is simply hit the subscribe button, and that way you're notified every time we bring new content or go live. Thanks for stopping by. And welcome back here into our Premier Sports Center studios, live here in Shelby Township, Michigan. It is Sunday night. It is the first Sunday of October. Actually, second Sunday of October. That was last Sunday. I apologize. I said like yesterday's the first Saturday of October. I'm getting stuck in the first here. But it's hard to believe that it's only 3 weeks away from Halloween. And our first trunk or treat for my family is this upcoming Thursday. I don't know why it's so early, but it forces us to buy costumes that much earlier, Dan. Which, as everyone who knows me knows, I can't stand buying costumes for one day. But anyways, I digress. It is October. It is week 8. It is playoff week here in high school soccer as week 1 of districts underway here starting Wednesday night here in the great state of Michigan. A lot of key matchups. We'll be out at Berkeley High School on Wednesdays. They welcome in Royal Oak. We'll be at Berkeley next week for their rounds of the second and third round of districts. And then be at Troy High for regionals and Athens for the state semifinals. So we have a very, very busy schedule ahead, but let's talk here Division III rankings. Still joined here by Kevin Tewitt, the Division I chair. He'll be on the hot seat here for that segment coming up here in a couple commercial breaks after we get through Division III and II here. But Dan, we're going to hop in Division III here in a second. Quick reminder, our merch store is open. We sold 2 shirts here today on our merch store, which is fantastic. The top 50 schools t-shirts are still available. You can purchase that right now on our MSN merch store through MichiganSoccerNetwork.com. You can also buy them right here on YouTube. While you're, you don't have to leave YouTube. Just while you're watching, just use your credit card and buy something. So, which is fantastic. So 20% off all orders right now through the end of October, and we're excited to be able to have that merch. A lot of really cool merch coming down the pipeline, Dan. That I think it's going to be really, really fun. That people will want to buy, and we are excited to bring that to you. Also, a reminder: Dream Team Reveal Show coming up here on November 7th, Tuesday, November 7th. We will be bringing the top players from around the state of Michigan from the Michigan High School Soccer Coaches Association. We'll bring that to you live on the air, and they'll have a chance to talk about their history and their schools and bring to you and announce the Mr. Soccer for the 2023 season. That'll be all done here on November 7th. But without further ado, let's get into the Division III rankings. They will end up being here at the bottom of your screen. And as I push off Division 4, and there's Division 3 rolling right now across the bottom of your screen. But let's get into this. Number 15, Imlay City, is the same as it was last week, 13-4-1. Wyoming Godwin Heights, 12-1, also the same as last week. And number 14, Williamston, 10-6-1, also the same as last week. At number 13, you're going to see a trend here. Number 12, Gladwin, 16-1-0. Oh, they're same. Number 12 in the state. Wait, there's a change. Unranked previously, Kingsford, 9-0. They are number 11 in the state. Number 10, Milan. They were the same last week, 10-3-2. Elk Rapids, 17-2-2. Also the same. This is getting boring, Dan. Alma as 15-4-0. They are 8. Also the same. Grand Rapids South Christian, 12-4-2. They are holding at 7. They're the same.
Flint Powers, down 2 from the top 5 at number 4 to number 6. And then here are your top 5 for Division 3. Notre Dame Prep holding at number 5. They're 12-5-1. Grosse Ile up 2 spots from number 6 to number 4 at 11-3-2. Hartford 18-1. Hudsonville Unity Christian 15-2-0. And Detroit Country Day 13-2-2 are 1-2-3 in Division 3 once again. Dan, there were 3 changes this week. Division 3 has shown us a couple times this season that they don't need a lot of changes. They had 2 here 2 weeks ago.
And one of the biggest changes is Kingford is ranked. Now, what's specific about that is the last 16 school years, the Upper Peninsula schools were not allowed to do that court order 20 years ago to participate in the MIHSSCA tournament. Kingsford has been very competitive all over these years. Them and Marquette have been kind of, for the most part, the class of the Upper Peninsula. They have one exceptional player, Jackson Buckley. They actually defeated Marquette a few weeks ago. And they haven't lost yet. They, and I believe they might be in the same district as Elk Rapids, which I believe won yet another Lake Michigan conference here as of late. Elk Rapids, I think we talked about a couple weeks ago. They've been in the Final Four, I think, like 17 times dating back to the 1980s. Elk Rapids, you know, they just consistently have quality players. Elk Rapids has a very good freshman class to kind of, will carry that torch, in the future. But I'll highlight Flint Powers for a reason that they were 3rd in the Saginaw Valley Conference. That's a league of all D1 and D2 schools. They tied for 3rd. They only had 1 loss. They tied with Lapeer for 3rd. Midland Dow and Grand Blanc shared that conference championship there. I think they were both 8-0-2 or 9-0-2. But Flint Powers, they play a tough league schedule, a tough non-league schedule. And I think that's why a lot of years you see them go deep in the tournament, because they're very well battle tested against schools their size. And then you up and down that list again, Milan has been very good the last couple of years. Grosse Ile, they've been to 5 straight state championship matches. They have, I think, 8 freshmen on their roster this year. Yet they have slowly but surely gotten better as a team. They're slowly climbing their rankings. We'll see if Grosse Ile can make yet another run deep into the tournament.
Kevin, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, consistency, like you said, with John Evans over at Grosse Ile. They started off a little slow and have slowly built up, and I think a lot of these freshmen are forgetting that they're freshmen and they're getting comfortable. And if John can make them believe they're dangerous, if not this year, again, you got to pull a freshman like that. John's got him for 4 years. Grosse Ile's going to keep the machine running. I can attest that Steve over at Country Day has got them playing. They're a legit number 1 for their pool right now. He's got them playing real well. They're moving the ball well. They defend well. Not afraid of a physical game, but clean. He's got them well coached. He's doing a great job with them, and I'd like to see. They're gonna. All right, I'll make a prediction. I'm gonna say that they're gonna make a run to the final.
Country Day.
Yep. Yeah.
You heard it first here. Breaking news. Kevin Tuitt says Country Day is going to go all the way to the state finals. What did they make their 30th state championship? They won? Was it like 40?
They've won 15 MSA titles, and they lost in the semis a couple of times. I think they got 1 or 2 runner-up, but that's just been a great juggernaut for 4 decades.
Yeah. I think Paul did a nice job passing on to Steve. He was underneath him for several years. They got a lot of respect, and Paul still gets to be on the sidelines with them. So he's a class act. He's been around for forever, and you don't have enough fingers to put the rings on that he's won, and you can't count the amount of college players he's put through that program.
And I don't think this year was unexpected. I think they brought back 8 starters. They lost 1 kid to MLS Next, but still brought back 8 starters from a Final Four team last year. Yeah. And I think everyone knew that Country Day was going to be good all regular season. Will be a factor here in the tournament as well.
I think they're comfortable and they're hungry.
Well, there you go. Well, you heard it first here from Mr. Kevin Tuitt, Division 1 chair, laying down the predictions for Division 3. Wait till we get to D1, see who has predictions there.
No, that's where you guys got to put your luck in.
Well, fair enough. But let's 3 changes in total this week. 12 teams remain the same. The teams that came in, Kingsford 9-0, as you mentioned, team that bounced out. Almont 11-1-2. I don't mention Almont, Chesney, Eaton Rapids, and Fenville. So Chesney, isn't that up in the UP as well?
No, that's northwest of Flint.
I don't know my geography very well, so I'm glad you got me there, Dan. But that is your Division III rankings, top 15 teams from around the state. Any final thoughts, Dan, on D3 before we head to break?
Well, we're going to see a lot. I think a lot of the same teams will likely make runs. I mean, there's going to be an upset in every division. Someone in the district opener or semifinals will go down. You never know who that's going to be. It happens every year. But I think, especially in D3 and D4, you start to see the powers that are there year in and out, make those serious runs. I mean, there will be someone to knock someone off, but chances are, you look at when we get to the Final Four, there will be no major surprises, at least in the 2 lower divisions. I could be wrong. We had it last year with unranked Ann Arbor Green Hills making the finals, but traditionally speaking, the best teams seem to rise to the cream of the crop there deep in the tournament.
I'm just excited that we're going to be able to watch all 4 state finals this year in person in one location. So talk about exciting stuff there. We'll be there live for our pregame show on the 4th of November, along with all the 8 teams that will be there for the state finals. So we're excited to bring that to you as well. But we will head to our next break. We come back here, we will give you Division II rankings, top 15 teams from around the state. You are watching the Michigan High School Soccer Coaches Association High School Ranking Show. We'll be back after this.
Granite City Food and Brewery has 2 Michigan locations in Troy and Northville. Serves made-from-scratch food, brews in-house beer, and even has brunch every Sunday from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. To learn more about their daily specials or to book a private party, visit gcfb.com. Make sure you head over to Granite City in Northville at the corner of 7 Mile and Haggerty, or the Troy location at 16 Mile and I-75.
In life, things aren't scripted.
If you're an athlete, we need people like you and translate those skills to officiating.
You can get a lot out of it. It happens in every town, in every game.
We never have a perfect game, but the rewards always outweigh the negativities.
Welcome back here into our Premier Sports Center studios, live here on this Sunday evening, October the 8th. It's week 8, October the 8th. I think the stars have aligned, Dan, here on this Sunday evening as we're talking high school soccer rankings. Dan Stickrat, John Turner here. Kevin Tewitt is joining us here as well this evening to talk high school rankings. He's the Division I chair. He'll be back with us here in just a moment. But Dan, let's talk here. So far, we've seen 15 changes between the 2 divisions. In total tonight, there were 39 changes into this rankings. And typically, towards this latter part of the season, things start to kind of shake up to where they should be. But will that be the case here for Division II? Which saw 12 changes this week of their own.
Yeah, because you're still seeing a lot of conferences, even if they're not finished or they finish the next 2 nights. You're still seeing certain teams like beat each other by a goal, tying, and it's causing a weekless shuffle. And there's been a couple occasions in each division where we've seen a team jump numerous spots or tumble out of the rankings or tumble from near the top to the bottom because they are a very good team. They just have one rough week.
That's right, that's right. Hey, if it's your first time stopping by, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Like us, share this with your friends and family. Follow us on all social media, MI Soccer Network. And we are excited to have you along for the ride here tonight. All the playoff games coming up here on MSN, all the games coming up will be on the MIHSSCA network. All highlights will be available next morning on our YouTube channel. You can watch those at the MIHSSCA network. You do have to pay the $10.99 a month in order to watch them. That's not from me, that's from them. But either way, that gives you a chance to watch the high quality games that we provide to you here on the Michigan Soccer Network on our affiliate page of the MIHSSCA network here coming up this week, next week, and the following week. So, but Dan, let's talk high school rankings here. Let's get Division II underway here as they'll be at the bottom of your screen. And we'll push those onto your screen along with Kevin Tewitt, who's in that hot seat. He'll be there all evening here tonight. So get your questions in. If you feel like you want to ask a tough question, he's here specifically for that tonight, to ask the tough questions. But Division II rolling across your screen right now. And we'll start here with number 15, down 2 spots from 13 to 15, Allendale 9-3-5. Previously unranked Flint Kearsley back in the rankings at 16-3-0. They are at that number 14 spot. Zeeland West 13-2-3. They are down 2 spots from 11 to 13. Mason 8-2-5 was 10th last week. They're now up at 12. DeWitt 10-5-2, previously unranked, are at that 11 spot. Holland 10-4-5, up 2 spots from 12 to 10. Riverview 14-4-2, down 1 spot from 8 to 9. Walled Lake Western 11-1-3, down 1 spot from 7 to 8. Grand Rapids Christian 10-5-2, down 1 spot from 6 to 7. Orchard Lake St. Mary's 11-4-0, down 2 spots from the top 5 from 4 to 6. And here are your top 5 for Division II. Sturgis 14-0-1 from 9 to 5. They move 4 spots into that top 5. Fruitport 14-2-2, up 1 from 5 to number 4. Grand Rapids Forest Hill Central 14-2-1. They hold at 3. Holland Christian hold at 14-1-1 at that number 2 spot. And Richland Gold Lake continues to be that number 1 at 14-1-1. They are the reigning state champions from Division II, and they are the number 1 ranked team once again.
Well, you look up and down this list. Flint Kearsley was there early in the season. They fell out. There's 12 schools in the Flint Metro League. There's kind of 6 that are fairly close to each other at the top of those standings. Kearsley is still 16-3-0. I believe they reached the Class A regional final, I want to say, in 1988. I don't know if they've ever won. If they have, it's maybe one time, one district since then. But they returned, I believe, like 6 players that were all-league or all-league honorable mention last year. Art Moody has this team off to their best start, again, over 30 years. DeWitt returned 3 all-state players. That's a program that was a state runner-up and a Final Four team here in the last 5 seasons. Very steadily a competitive team in the Lansing area, but they did not crank the rankings till now. 10-5-2. They do play a lot of Division I schools, which can contribute some of their losses and ties, but Division II level, you can never count out DeWitt. They're a very consistently good team. Riverview was your Final Four team last year. They graduated 8 starters. They're down 1 this week, but they've been consistently good the last few years there. Coach Ben Zalisky's done a great job with that program. I don't think I've ever seen Wall Lake Western in the last week of the regular season with just 1 loss. It's maybe the best team in their school history. Grand Rapids Christians trailed off a little bit. Orchard Lake St. Mary's did lose in that Catholic High School League championship final, the Bishop championship on the other night in a shootout. And then top 5, Sturgis won the Wolverine Conference for the first time in school history this year. 14-0-1, they're just one of 2 or 3 undefeated teams left in all divisions combined. Sturgis, this is probably the best team they've ever had. Fruitport's in the top 5, again, 14-2-2. They're in that same league with Hudsonville Unity Christian the Blue Division of the Ottawa-Kent Conference. Another team having their best season in school history. And then the top 3 teams are powerhouse programs. Forest Hills Central, they will play Forest Hills Northern in an all Grand Rapids Ottawa-Kent Conference White Division Tournament Championship tomorrow. You remember Forest Hills Northern's up in D1. They were a Final Four team in D2 last year. Both those programs are very good. And you look at number 2 and number 1. Holland Christian was your Division III champion last year. Moved up to D2, but graduated 8 starters. They got a very good senior class. I think they had 15 kids back. They're 14-1-1, and they're up just behind Richmond Gull Lake. Gull Lake has been in the Final Four for the last 5 years. They've won 2 state championships in 20 and 22, brought back 14 players, and the Blue Devils are humming along. They're not as deep offensively in terms of total goals scored, but this team's only lost 4 games in 2 seasons, and they play a lot of good teams. So they're going to be your odds-on favorite to win the D2 state champion. Now, will they win it? They're going to have get through especially very tough regional. But they're a program that those kids are used to winning. They've made the run. They're experienced, and someone's going to have to play an A game to knock off that program.
Well, that they will, as that is your Division II rankings. 12 changes in total here this week. Teams coming in: DeWitt 10-5-2, Flint Kearsley 16-3-0, out for the first time this season. Auburn Hills Avondale 13-4-1, and Fenton 13-4-2. You think about that too for a second. The teams that are not in the rankings anymore still have unbelievable seasons that they're having, it's hard to make these decisions if you are the chairs of each of these divisions. I will mention Bay City John Glenn 16-3-1, New Boston Huron 12-6-0, Ortonville Brandon 11-6-2, and Cedar Springs 12-4-1.
Yeah, you talk about teams that aren't ranked but having good years. Bay City John Glenn, this is the best record they've had in their school history, bar none. And then Cedar Springs 12-4-1, playing a very deep league in one of the divisions of the Ottawa-Kent Conference, but this is one of their better teams ever had. So it's programs like that may not be ranked, but they're very good, they're very dangerous, and probably a team you don't want to face, especially early in the postseason.
Kevin, any thoughts here on Division II?
Gull Lake is tough. They're sitting ahead of Portage Central in their own bracket over there, and Portage Central's in our top 6, and has been consistently one of the strong teams in D1. And here they are, Gull Lake's sitting in front of them. So they've got the depth, they've got experience. I think you nailed it when you said someone's going to have to play their A game, because your B game's not going to cut it even against their B game. You're going to have to play the best game, I think, of your season to take out Gull Lake right now. They're the only one, I think, that's going to stop themselves. If they play poorly, that's about it. If they play how they've been playing all year, it's going to be difficult to beat Gull Lake.
No, it's a great point, and we talk about this, and we haven't talked about it a lot, but we are going to have a playoff preview show here. It's scheduled for tomorrow night, but we might move, there's a good chance, actually it's a 100% chance, we're moving that to Tuesday night. We would like to have Dan here on the broadcast with us. So Dan unfortunately pulled away from work tomorrow, but he will be available hopefully Tuesday night. We'll see, cross our fingers. But we'll bring you a preview show here of the playoffs. And in order to win a championship, to go all the way, there are some things that have to really happen. Obviously, you have to be playing your best soccer, right? We know that, right? And best soccer doesn't always mean like the best, most technical and tactical. It could be ugly soccer, but just finds a way to win, right? And that's a lot of times what you'll see happen in these games, because they're not pretty goals. They're strums in front of the net, right? They're loose balls that you just can't clear out, right? You got to have the ball bounce your way. You got to have luck. Luck is going to be a part of this. I don't care. You ask any team that's won a championship in the history of their lives, and they will tell you that they had some luck go their way. That luck could be the way the wind blew, the way a coach moved a goalpost or a thing in front before the game. I mean, you name it. There are so many things that can happen luck-wise that help you get there. And the calls have to go your way, right? That's like the recipe for success, to winning a championship. If your team can find a way to have those pieces together. Looking at Rochester Adams last year, we talked about game in and game out and week in, week out last year, is that they had something special. But was that their most talented team they've ever had? Probably not. Right, we've seen a lot of talented teams come through the ways of Rochester Adams, and I think even we've seen teams that go 21-0, like Troy Athens did back a number of years ago. They lost in the first round of districts, right? So you just have to have everything going at the right time and find your success. So, but those are your Division II rankings. When we come back here from our last commercial break, it is the number 1 ranked teams in Division I, top 15 teams. We'll talk about that. Kevin Tuitt, the Division I chair, is sitting right to our right. He's in the hot seat. You have been asking us for weeks, why? And he's going to give you the answer on some level when we come back here from break. But you're watching the Michigan High School Soccer Coaches Association High School Ranking Show. I'm John Turner. This is Dan Stickrat. Kevin Tuitt will be back after this.
Number 9. My dad and my grandfather are officials. I've grown up around officials and seeing how much they enjoy being part of the games. As a student athlete, I've always appreciated the people out there who are willing to give back to the kids. The Legacy program lets me officiate while I'm still in high school, working younger kids' games. Officiating gives me a better understanding of the game. I get to make some pretty good money for a high school kid, and I even get to spend some quality time with my dad. There's help wanted. Just whistle.
Now Worrell has a good cutback from him. He'll fire one, and that's going to go in!
Beat Up Sweet Chili Lime Sauce has 3 perfect ingredients. Sweet, chili, lime. People keep telling us sweet isn't an ingredient. How these wings get sweet then? Introduce a new Sweet Chili Lime for a limited time at Buffalo Wild Wings.
Are you looking to grow here in 2023? Let the Michigan Soccer Network help you and your restaurant fill more seats. Help you and your law firm get new clients. Help you and your dental practice find more patients. Find more roofing customers this upcoming summer. And to help you and your medical practice find new patients. To learn more or get started, visit MichiganSoccerNetwork.com.
Welcome back here into our Premier Sports Center studios. It is Sunday, it is ranking night, and I know that all of you are so happy and excited about the Detroit Lions. They are 4-1, Dan. 4-1. My goodness, last year at this point, I think they were 0-4. But
it's one of those things. Like I was talking to someone on the phone after that game today, and I said it's almost it was another friend of mine. But I was like, this is surreal. They're 4-1. But they looked like a top 5 team in the NFL. It's just strange because 3 years ago, by this point of the season, if you were a Lions fan or just a football fan in general or a sports fan, you're pulling your hair out about the Lions. It's been a 180 turnaround in less than 3 years. So.
Well, my hair doesn't spike up as normally. It's every Sunday it happens due to the Lions, so it just kind of happens on its own. But so pulling your hair out just naturally sticks up. I mean, Dan, we talk about this, and I think I was just talking about this last night in a broadcast with Gold Star FC Detroit, who's 3-3-16 this season. It's their first year in the NISA, and they've struggled, in this first year. They are finding new and creative ways to lose soccer games. And we have seen that for a long time with the Detroit Lions, right? Finding new and creative ways to lose games. Games that they have very handily should have won, and won sometimes big. And the Lions that you're seeing right now this year are finding ways. They've learned to win, right? And I think that's the thing that when you start looking at success is when you see a team like they had that hot start against Green Bay here last Thursday, right? And you're like, okay, here we go again, right? There's a team, they scored a bunch of points in the first half, and sure as crap, they're gonna blow it here in the second half. But they didn't do that, right? That's what we're used to as Lions fans, is seeing them score big points in the first half and then falling asleep in the second half. Now they're still falling asleep, but they're doing just enough to win games at the end, and that's all that matters. And today we saw that first and foremost, again, today against the Carolina Panthers. So very, very Very, very cool stuff. But hey, it is the Division I rankings that we've got coming up here once again. A couple comments coming in during the last segment. David Kane, are you guys covering any District 13 matches coming up? Yes, we are. This Wednesday, Berkeley versus Royal Oak. Upcoming next week, we'll cover the district semis and the finals at Berkeley High School here next week. And the core reason behind that, guys, there's a couple of reasons, but the main one for me is that I don't have to bring internet. It's already there. So from a production standpoint, that makes life really easy for us when there's a press box that already has an internet port that actually works. So that's one of the reasons why we're at Berkeley. CMR Tube, love this. Sager, Nasser, Edsel Ford on top. What about Woodhaven versus Edsel tomorrow? We don't have that on our schedule. That's probably why, but
that should decide the Downriver League Championship, I believe.
It should very well decide the Downriver Championship. But we're going to bring Kevin Tuitt back in here now. Kevin, before we even get into the Division I rankings, this is an opportunity, I think, for you to talk to the viewer at home who doesn't know much about this process. We talked about it a little bit during our pre-show, but hey, now that we're in here and talking the rankings, what are your overall thoughts here about this week?
Not just this week, this whole season's been a bit crazy. You have teams that are dominant that all of a sudden you find out they've lost a couple players and they go down a handful of games and you've got to move them down the rankings, but all of a sudden they've got those players back and they're lighting teams up. And it's gone both ways. You've got some teams that have some really solid records. They're doing well, they're playing well, but their MPR keeps slipping because some of the opponents that they're going against are not as solid. You've got teams, again, I'll go back and I'll use Troy as a mentioning point. There's a team that's running almost at a 500 season, and I still would not want to have to play Troy. Biggest thing, consistency has been a challenge. This year, or this week, we had several of the top teams drop a game. Athens right now is on fire. I'll make that statement before we even start. When I go through this, Todd's got 30 goals for, 0 against. I think 7-0 in the last matches, and they literally hammered 2 of the top 5 teams in the state. Shut them out. And these are not weak teams. These are top teams. And he's not even in first place in the OAA Red. Yeah. If you want to talk about timing right now, Mr. Todd Hugh has Athens sprinting downhill.
Well, that's a great point. And when we talk about these rankings, we'll get into them here in just a second. He said it. I mean, as best you could put it. I mean, you've got teams who, this week alone, just what we've seen across the board. The OAA Red was decided this past week. The team that won the Red lost 4-0 to Athens, lost to Berkeley, right, as well, and that's in the season, but still found a way to win because Berkeley had 2 ties and a loss. It is the toughest league, arguably, in the state of Michigan. We talk about that every single week, week in and week out, how difficult that league is. And I think any year, Dan, when looking at the Red, you could go in at the beginning of the year and say any one of those teams could be in a Final Four or a state championship game in November, just looking at how tough that league could be. So, but they did spend most of the season beating each other up, and districts in the same way. And we're going to see how that shakes up here later this week and into next week as all these teams start to play against each other once again. But let's get into here the Division I rankings. They will come across the bottom of your screen as they have. We will go to Kevin here after I announce all of those. If you've got questions for Kevin, this is your chance. We don't have Kevin on quite often. This is the first time he's ever made his debut on the network. We'll let have him back here in the future. but this is your opportunity to ask him. That there's a reason it's called the hot seat. All right, there's a reason we call it that. We want him to feel the pressure, because I feel it every single Sunday when we announce these rankings. But here we go. As here are your Division I rankings, starting with number 15. Previously unranked number 15, Brighton at 12-3-2. Down 6 spots from 8 to number 14, Fraser 12-2-2. Edsel Ford holds at number 13 at 12-1-4. Making their into the rankings for the first time this season. Utica Eisenhower 13-1-2. They are at that 12 spot. East Kentwood up 3 spots from 14 to 11 at 12-3-1. Rochester Adams, who was ranked early in the season, number 1, have kind of bounced around back into the rankings this week at 10-6-1. They are at that 10 spot. Rockford went up 2 spots from 11 to 9. They are 11-3-2. Clarkston 10-2-1, up 2 spots from 10 to number 8. Oxford 13-4-3. They're down 1 spot from 6 to number 7. Forest Hills Northern 14-1-0, down 1 spot from 5 to number 6. Here are your top 5 in Division 1. Portage Central 13-1-2. They're down 1 from 4 to number 5. Traverse City West is down 1 from 3 to 4 this week. Troy Athens has made their way into the top 5. Previously number 9, now number 3 in the state of Michigan, 12-3-2. Northville 14-2-1, sitting at 2nd. And again, in Division 1, Berkeley 16-1-2, holding at the number 1 spot in the state of Michigan for the third consecutive week for Division 1.
And you look at the top 15 and then the 3 teams that fell out down in the honorable mention. 13 of those programs have never won a state championship. And it doesn't mean these programs aren't good, because traditionally speaking, the likes of a Portage Central, they're always competitive. Oxford, Clarkson, Rockford got to the finals last year, came that close. Their only loss was in the state championship. Utica Eisenhower debuted this week out of the MAC Red. They've never won. They've lost in the finals back in 2004. Dearborn, Edsel Ford, Fraser, Brighton, Portage Central, Northville, and Berkeley are the top 2 spots. They've been, steadily good. I mean, Northville has 125, 130 kids come out every year. Henry Klemus does a great job with that program. They have never been fortunate because, we look at the districts and regionals around the state, and some of these teams, there is not a night off. For them to get to the Final Four, it is a gauntlet. And, I look at this list, and we'll talk about teams that came in, because Adams is back in there to defending the Division I state champs. They had injury issues. Some of their top players missed a handful of games. Those kids are all back, and Adams is starting to play better, and they do have like 12 or 13 kids back from that state championship team last year. Brighton has kind of been sitting under the radar. They finished 2nd in the KLAA West behind Northville. I think they're 1 game behind Northville in those standings. And Brighton is one of those underdog teams, kind of a dark horse. They have everything you need to make a deep run. Will they do it? The Bulldogs have a very tough path, but is the talent there? They brought back 8 starters. They got one of the better players in the state to come back from the Michigan Wolves from the MLS Next. That's a team that you're going to have to keep an eye out for, come the tournament, which starts later this week. And Rockford is another team. They were runner-up last year. They lost their goalie to MLS Next. They had a couple injuries of key players early in the season. They're starting to get players back. They play East Kentwood in the Ottawa-Kent Conference Red Division Championship tomorrow. East Kentwood was in 1st place. Rockford was in 2nd in the 18 division. So 1 versus 2 in that conference final. There's more than a dozen conference tournaments that wrapped up on Friday or will wrap up on Monday or Tuesday. So that's going to be a huge game in terms of conference tournaments. And then we mentioned in Grand Rapids, Forest Hills Central, number 3 in Division 2, plays number 6 in D1, Grand Rapids, Forest Hills Northern, and Ottawa-Kent Conference White Division. That's another huge matchup. Both those teams are very dangerous, and both can make a deep run. Northern was D2 last year and got to the Final Four, and Forest Hills Central is not in D2. They're very talented, but there could be a later round matchup if Forest Hill Central can make a run. You know, would they end up running up against Richmond Gull Lake? So a lot of very good teams that are so close together in D1 and D2. We can talk about there's a lot of teams that have been ranked at times this season and have fallen out. A lot of teams that are kind of knocking on the door. We saw Ann Arbor Pioneer and Huron fall out. Those two teams are very good. I would not be shocked if one of those two teams was in the Final Four. They have the talent to get them there. It's just that they're so close. Winning that district, which also includes Saline, another very good team, and Ann Arbor Skyline is very struggling to score goals right now, but very, very solid defensively. That'd be a team that, you know, could knock someone off, could wreck someone's season because they're just good enough to do that. So yeah, it's be interesting. It's interesting time. D1. I'm sure Kevin, you know, it's very difficult to do the rankings, especially in D1 when you have so many teams. I mean, we probably had 30 schools mentioned in the top 15 around mentioned this year.
Yeah, I feel for all the teams that, you know, oh, my team should be here. Yeah, you're probably right. I'm not going to disagree. Like you said, I could probably put 40 to 50 teams that could legitimately be in the argument for these games. This year has been all over the map. You've got wins and losses between different divisions and different conferences where people are trying to match up games. And one of the challenges that I run into, we talked about it earlier in the show, there's a lot of information that people aren't dealing with. You may have a senior night going on. You may look at it as this is a non-league matchup, and all of a sudden you've got a different result. And hey, well, we beat those guys. Yes, but you don't know that 6 of their starters weren't in that game. You've got injury, like you said, Josh over at Adams, he's getting healthy, and that's going to be a dangerous team. I saw him at the beginning of the year, and people were like, why do you have him up so high in the rankings? Because I saw him. He's got some danger over there. He's got pace. There's no one who's going to smash him around physically. He can keep up with anyone, and he can play soccer. You talk about Ann Arbor Pioneer and Huron. Throughout the season, I've had multiple coaches contact me who either played them or watched them play an opponent of theirs, and we're like, look, these two teams are legitimate, and some had disagreements over which one they thought was higher than the other, but they acknowledge that both teams are dangerous, and I agree with Dan on the fact that either one of those two could be in a Final Four. They're capable. We've seen them play quality soccer. Frazier's another one, right? That they physically could handle most teams. If it got physical, athletically, they can keep up. They have decent pace, and they can play soccer. So Mike's got them playing well over there. Biken's done miracles over at Oxford. Adam's done just a class job with building up. He took a beating, bringing up a lot of freshmen, a lot of young players, and did it for a while, and now it's paying off here. He's now in the conversation, legitimately knocking off top 5 teams. So that's another, interesting pool. You go over to the Dearborn area and downriver, and you're dealing with Etzel Ford, you're dealing with Dearborn. Legitimate, solid teams, depending on which team comes to play that day. Cass Tech is building up players that people don't know about. You have Brighton, like you said, who's been kind of flying under that radar, and all of a sudden, they beat Northville. Where did that come from? They're playing solid. Brighton's got a tradition of that, being a team that can grind its way in, just like Saline. Saline's one of those teams that I never want to bet against, just because you have no idea. They may have a 500 season, and all of a sudden playoff time comes and they make a run for it. Let's not forget the whole west side of the state. Giuseppe's done a good job over, he had some big shoes to fill for John over at East Kentwood, and he's got the ball rolling over there. You got former college player's got experience. He's also got expectations. He can say, look, I've been there, I've done it, here you go, kid. and East Kentwood's coming along strong. Like you said, with Rockford, there's a team. Again, last year they made one heck of a run, and they were legit. They weren't there just because they had one good game. They made it through the season and made it all the way to the final dance. You got teams like Reese Puffer that have been going in and out on this. I agree with people at home. If you're looking and you're like, my team should be in there, you're probably right. I'm just limited on how many people I can put in an honorable mention. Personally, I'd love to put a word in for my team on certain weeks. There's times that UD has come in and played, and then we've had our days where we didn't play. You go in CC, roughest start I think they've had in a while. They've had a good run, but Gene just came back and had a nice win this week. So CC's another one that you can't count out the Catholic League. We're a wild card. We beat the heck out of each other, kind of like the OAA does. You can look at our record sometimes, and it doesn't always tell the story. TC West coming up top. People look, okay, they don't have as much competition up top, but they forget that they're playing some solid D2 teams up there. You've got a lot of grinding that goes on, and they seem to find a special player here or there. And when they find their magic, they're another dangerous team. Like I said, there's probably another, honestly, 10, 15 teams that could go into the honorable mention, and they're legit. Like, you could make a case for them. So if you're one of them, I apologize. But if you'd like to see your names up there, please encourage your coaches to send me information, data. If you took a tough loss, why did you take the loss? If you're on a hot streak, send that. If you have a special player like, hey, this kid's not getting any love, please send some stats. Like, Johnny has just scored 3 hat tricks in a row. That information helps. And the ones that help provide it, you improve the entire process from top to bottom. So if you, prior to complaining, offer information. And those who do send information, I applaud you. Thank you. It makes everyone's job up here easier. Anyone who sits on this spot. So.
Well, wow. There you go. I mean, when you put it like that, I mean, that explains a lot of things there, Kevin, and we appreciate you telling us. Comments coming in. We asked the fans, the viewers, to ask some questions. Here is one now. This question coming in from Gage Hopkins. Reese Puffer not ranked anymore? Question mark, question mark, question mark. I think you answered that one a little bit, just based on the fact that, hey, there are teams that, if you think your team should be ranked, probably should be, but you only have 15 spots to do it. So I think that answered that question. Does Kevin go based on record or skill? My assumption before I even, answer that question before I even assume.
It's a combo. You could take a look at rosters, and if it's based just off roster, then there's no need for me. Just run a roster. Okay, how many of these guys are selected? What level are they playing at currently in club ball? And be done with it. But you have chemistry. You have tradition at some of the high schools. You have matchups. We're talking right now, who's going to make it to the Final Four? Well, you might want to talk about who's not going to make it to the Final Four, because in another week and a half to 2 weeks, probably 5 of the top 10 teams are going to be eliminated by another 5 of the top 10 teams. So the wild card, like I always tell players or parents when they ask, what does it take to win a state championship? Survival for 7 games. Doesn't mean that you have to be a better team all year than that team. You just have to be better than your opponent for one day, one time. And like you had alluded to, John, you need a little luck. Sometimes that survival is a PK. Sometimes that survival is winning on a 7th or 8th shutout shot. A goalie making a save out of his mind, getting horizontal and stopping 15, 20 shots. It can go all over the place. But it's survival for 7. The team who survives 7 games is the team holding the trophy at the end, as much as when it comes to skill. But rankings, it's a combination. So I'll take the blame when you disagree with me, but please offer data. Don't sit in the cheap seats.
Yeah, I mean, this list, I mean, like we talked, there's probably 30 teams that were either ranked or honorable mention this year. In the girls' season last spring in Division I, there was close to 50 schools throughout the course of the season that were ranked or spent time in an honorable mention. Again, because there's so many teams so close. They asked why Muskegon, Reese Pusser fell out. It's one of the best teams I've ever had. Liam Smith is a likely dream team candidate. He's going to Western Michigan. He's had an amazing high school career, Division I player. He's one of 3 kids that are playing high school in Michigan right now have committed to Western. We all know how good Western Michigan University's been the last decade. You know, they recruit the state of Michigan exceptionally well. So Reese Puffer, they've had a great season. They brought back 16 players. I think they had 9 starters back, and they were a Division II team last year, which had some up and downs, but they won a district. Because everyone knew they were going to be good this year. There was no secret about the Rockets being good. They've been in and out of that rankings. They've been one of the top teams in the Green Division of the Ottawa Kent Conference all season long. And they're a team that can win a district and maybe go far. That pocket is another pocket where you can look at 5, 6, 7 teams about who's going to make it to the regional finals out of that group. Because there's going to be one play, Kevin, as you alluded to, one save, one free kick, one diving save by the goalie, one header off the goal line by a marking back, whatever the case is, that will separate you from going home or advancing to the next round.
Yeah, Reese Puffer is one that I knew I would take some heat for because their challenge. I mean, they went 2-0 this week. They're a solid squad. But you have Brighton, right? So is Reese Puffer tougher or is Brighton better? That's a tough call. I don't count Reese Puffer out. They're the real deal. Talking about Western Michigan as a Chippewa, it's a tough one for me to swallow, but I do have to root for the Broncos when it comes to Michigan soccer, one of the only MAC teams to survive and keep a men's program. And when everybody else is recruiting outside of the state of Michigan to bring players into the state of Michigan instead of recruiting players from home, I had to give them props for how many solid seasons that Western all of a sudden was a contender and beating some of the big boys and doing it with, guess what, high school soccer players. And that, to me, that showed how deep Michigan's soccer pool is. The fact that you had players who played at maybe not the top level, but maybe a second tier of, you know, the Jags or the Wolves or the Nationals or whoever they were playing for at the time, but then were able to still turn that in and prove that they could play at the D1 level in college. And I think more colleges need to kind of wake up to that, but that was my only props in my life that I will give to Western Michigan as a former Chippewa.
Well, I obviously I couldn't agree with you more. And you know, when we talk about the rankings, and we just covered Division I here, if you're just joining us, 12 changes here this week. There were 3 teams in: Rochester Adams, Utica Eisenhower, and Brighton. The 3 teams out: Ann Arbor Pioneer, Muskegon Reese Puffer, and Ann Arbor Huron. Those teams that are out are all honorable mentions this week. The question I have, and Hussein Bedoin from Edsel, if I pronounce that right, Bedoin.
Yep.
Edsel assistant coach here. Thank you for all that you do covering high school soccer in Michigan. It's been needed for a long time, and your efforts are appreciated. David Kane, Cam Simpson is a baller at U of D. So it's
I'll tell you what, I couldn't agree more. With my players, sometimes I'm a quiet person about beating my chest with some of my players, but Cam Simpson, he came up as a freshman, held his own as a freshman, a lot of pressure starting as a sophomore, tore it up last year as a junior, and a lot of guys don't see him because we didn't carry far. And for those of you who are understanding some of the player rankings, it's more difficult to push your players if you don't win the district. And when Cam was sitting in the district with Troy, Athens, Berkeley, for two of his last battles. People forget that my little guy playing right back has marked up multiple Mr. Soccers and locked them down. He's marked up some of the top players that are going D1 and locked them down. I couldn't say enough about how tough he is. My whole back line, I love him. All the way across, Miles Purdy, Camden Art, and Connor. These guys, I love how they're playing. But when you're talking seniors with Cam Simpson, whoever gave him props, I didn't hear it on that one. They're correct. He can play.
What kind of pathway do you have, Kevin, with your district? Because you got moved out of that one of those.
Yeah, we're over in District 12. So I'm not saying a word. No, we have a far tougher district. I've heard some people chirp some things that have obviously never been over in this pool, and I've been in this pool before. It's an unpredictable pool is what we have, and that's how I'll leave it. It's an unpredictable. You said it could be one save, it could be one PK every single year when it comes to playing in this district. It's an unpredictable game. You're going to play some guys that are going to hit shots from 40 yards out, some guys that players have no idea who they are because the guy's been playing in the men's league since he was 12. It's not like playing against, KLA team that you know everybody on, or an OAA team that you know everybody on. Unless you know those guys and you're down playing with them in the men's league, or you've been playing with, a lot of those guys have been playing together for 10 years on the same club team. So it's going to be tougher than people think.
Well, Kevin, we want to say thank you for taking the time out of your busy Sunday to join us here tonight in studio to talk rankings and everything in between for all of this show. So thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, we are glad that you stopped by. Before we head out here, just want to do some quick housekeeping. Our preview show for the playoffs will happen on Tuesday night now, hoping that Dan can make it. If not, I'll go solo the best I can, talking about all these teams, all 500 of them across the state of Michigan on Tuesday night. But hey, that will be a wrap here for this Week 8 of the high school rankings. All of these rankings are available right now live on our MichiganSoccerNetwork.com website. Those were released here at 9 p.m., so you can check that out. We'll have the recap of this here tomorrow morning by 9 a.m. A new article feature coming out tomorrow written by Dan. We'll talk about, you'll see that tomorrow morning on our website. And also we'll have our previews of all the districts available later this week throughout the state of Michigan in regards to what we think will happen in those districts. So keep your comments coming. We appreciate you all here tuning in here on this Sunday evening, the 8th day of October. Again, the top 15 teams from across the state here were just announced, and all your number ones have stayed the same here for the last couple weeks, so been very consistent at the number ones. But for Dan Stickrat, I'm Jonathan Turner, our special guest tonight, Kevin Tuitt. Before we wrap it up here, Dan, any final thoughts?
No, I'm excited. I think, as we all are, we're finally at the point where conferences are wrapping up. The state tournament's just days away. And I'm always excited to see that one school that a lot of people kind of flew under the radar, not a lot of people talked about, or a player a lot of people didn't talk about in the preseason or during the season, but they shine at the right moment, or their team steps up, pulls an upset, maybe wins the district. I guess we talked about earlier in the show, there's always that one team that everyone was excited about all season long. They get upset early in the tournament. And there's always that one school that makes a deep run, maybe to the Final Four, that a lot of people didn't expect was going to happen, 2-3 months ago.
That's right. A lot happening here, a lot of excitement coming up here later this week. And then the next week, as the state playoffs get underway here on Wednesday night, we'll be out at Berkeley High School as they welcome in Royal Oak. Thursday night, our PMG Sports Network first ever volleyball match And we'll be out at University of Michigan versus MSU for club soccer on Friday night. But from all of us at Michigan Soccer Network, have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next time right here for more soccer